Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Green Chemistry and Commerce Council Mainstreaming Green Chemistry webinar entitled U.S. State Department of Commerce and its Role in Supporting Green Chemistry. My name is Joel Tickner, and I am the co-director of the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council, and welcome to today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council, the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council is a business-to-business network of companies ranging across sectors and levels of supply chain who collaborate to advance green chemistry along the supply chain. For those of you who are not members, we welcome you to join the GC3. If you go to the GC3 website at www.greenchemistryandcommerce.org, there's information about the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council, including a new GC3 video and other information on the benefits of membership in the GC3. Today's webinar is part of a series of webinars that we have created to build understanding and momentum towards developing an agenda for mainstreaming green chemistry. And what we mean by mainstreaming green chemistry is getting to the point where green chemistry is the way we do chemistry to design products and apply those products across products and sectors. So today's webinar is part of that series to understand what are the opportunities and the leverage points and incentives to support a mainstream of green chemistry in commerce. Today's speaker is Blandine Trouille. Blandine is a strategic analyst at the U.S. Department of Commerce with a unique knowledge of chemicals manufacturing and its interrelationships with the economic policies, environmental protection, and consumer trends. She has competencies in navigating the complexities of multicultural environments to achieve consensus among entities with diverse mandates. In the International Trade Administration of the Department of Commerce, Blandine's responsibilities include developing support for diverse constituencies for the major initiatives promoted by the ITA and providing leadership on issues relating to 21st century international chemicals management and on matters related to standards and regulations that contribute to sustainable development and trade. Blandine grew up on a farm in northern France and has a MS in agricultural sciences and environmental law. As in all of our webinars, due to the number of participants on today's call, all lines will be muted. However, if you have a question or comment, please type it in the Q&A box located in the pull-down menu at the top of your panel at the top of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'd like to welcome Blandine to today's webinar. Thank you so much for Blandine for participating in today's webinar.
Thank you, Joel. Definitely, I appreciate very much the opportunity to make the presentation, and it's basically a wonderful opportunity for Department of Commerce to basically reach out to companies in the field. So maybe a little background on who I am and how long I have been basically with the Department of Commerce. I've been with the Department of Commerce for 15 years and working in the chemicals office for probably 8 years now. Because of my background, I've been working a lot on international chemicals management matters, especially related to United Nations, the conventions on chemicals management, as well as the work on the OECD. I want to mention that because this is the origin of my seeking basically new opportunities, and yeah, after a number of years basically participating to the interagency working group on negotiation on chemicals management at the international level, I really felt that there was a need for, you know, some new blood coming in, meaning that the U.S. government was receiving the information from the international community, but because of the regulatory system, I felt were kind of lacking in helping address and respond. And so 5 years ago, I basically contacted trade association here in town and asked them what about these problems in chemistry and what is the work done to try to resolve. And that's when I came in contact with basically companies starting to work on green chemistry as well as organizations. And that was the beginning of basically the discovery of the Green Chemistry Institute, but also Green Building Council, GC3, etc. So based on that, I basically decided, well, Department of Commerce has basically a role to play here in the sense that when companies are working on invention, innovation toward commercialization, we at Department of Commerce basically allowed to push this commercialization beyond borders. And so that was the beginning of thinking, well, how to bring transparency, visibility on those innovators and how to start to bring them not just in the country with their products and processes, but also overseas. So the title of the presentation is Advanced Manufacturing and Innovation because this is what my Department of Commerce resonates to. Advanced manufacturing is an important matter. Innovation is also important because innovation brings competitiveness. So trying to get into the next slide. So the presentation will include a very quick presentation of Department of Commerce, the business of chemistry, scope and drivers, why Department of Commerce cares, opportunities and challenge in relation to green chemistry. And I am going to spend some time on the Market Development Cooperator Program, which is a grant that Department of Commerce offers, and the deadline is February 2015. So Department of Commerce, it's a large family. I come from a family of 7, and so it's you know, it's kind of similar, many members, sometimes connected to one another, sometimes not so. So yeah, commerce includes NOAA, which basically relates to satellites, weather forecasts, but also fisheries and regulations associated to that. The bolded members are basically entities within the Department of Commerce with which I am working on this green chemistry project. And so it's NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, EDA, Economic Development Agency, ITA, International Trade Administration, this is where I belong, and then MBDA, which is the Minority Business Development Agency, but you have a listing here of all the members. The International Trade Administration is an interesting entity which has basically access, which approach trade from a country-based approach, that's global market. So that's where you get the information on foreign countries, industry and analysis. So this is the manufacturing part, so the sector-based type of knowledge. And then, of course, there is the section related to enforcement and compliance of trade provisions. So wanting to remind you that you do have access to Department of Commerce headquarters, and that will be the website commerce.gov, but you also have access directly through export.gov to Department of Commerce representative either in the country overseas or basically at the national level. In each state, we have what we call United States Export Assistance Center, and the title is pretty clear. They help you move your products, processes overseas. The Manufacturing Extension Partnership is basically housed in NIST and does basically technical support for companies. If you want to become an advocate for green chemistry through basically trade negotiation, then definitely consider applying for membership on the Trade Advisory Committee, and then you would go to trade.gov/OAC, Office of Advisory Committee. So the business of chemistry, I'm going to go very quickly through that because you are probably in the field of chemistry or know of it. It's an important sector, $670 billion enterprise, definitely supporting 25% of GDP, 10% of U.S. exports. It's also an important sector in terms of employment. In terms of multiplier of employment, so one basically worker in the chemistry sector supports 5 jobs in sectors related to chemistry, and which sector is not, most sectors are. So here you have basically an example of the influence of chemistry on the entire economy. Blue characteristic of the chemical sector, it's an important business. It's a varied business, so basic chemicals, commodities, but also specialty chemicals, ag chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and consumer goods. So basically a lot of intelligence going into those products and processes. In terms of prices, we rank fairly well. Growth prospects within the nation, we are a mature nation, so potential for growth are slightly limited. Nonetheless, in niche sector, and again, to me, that's the beauty of green chemistry, is that it taps into, you know, basically niche type of sector. There is a tremendous potential for growth. Definitely important on R&D, and also very knowledge incentive, which is a tremendous support in competitiveness. The red characteristics are basically new patterns in chemistry, in the global trading of chemicals, products, and processes, whereas 20 years ago, the relationships were between, you know, a few countries in the Western world. We have seen definitely a tremendous shift towards manufacturing and R&D toward Asia. Also at the level of companies, basically influencing is coming from different places. And major shareholders or financial funds are now influential in basically setting the strategies of companies. The U.S. is becoming a major importer of chemical. We are still a big exporter, but definitely importing more and more. In terms of green chemistry and again international chemicals management, there is this lack of regulatory reform at the U.S. federal level, which really does not allow the U.S. government per se to have leadership in chemicals management, which we had in the, I guess, 1980s. Lack of regulatory reform does not create for innovators transparency and certainty. It's a difficult sector in terms of, you know, setting basically guidelines toward chemicals management because of the breadth of perspective that one has to collect prior to making a decision. It's a difficult sector because it's often basically suffering from positions which are excessive and divisive. Scope and drivers of green chemistry, I think I will go very quickly through this. Product design, definitely manufacture and processing, disposal as well. Drivers include economic benefit of having innovative products, reduce cost in terms of energy efficiency, water use, but also compliance, and that is you know, an important parameter, especially when we move overseas with national chemicals management scheme, which are different from one country to the other. Definitely being in the innovation field encourage investment. And again, I think that there is no doubt that the international demand, both in terms of consumer and citizens, is very interested in greener products and processes, and so green chemistry is of tremendous value this way. Adequacy of the approach. Again, based on my experience in facing the international community and the concerns or the needs of the international community, I do feel that green chemistry starts to basically address some of the issues, which are basically the need to know and disclose. So disclose, yes, to competent authorities. There is IP related to chemistry, and so you don't disclose just to disclose, but there is definitely a need to inform competent authority, and this need is not going to move away. There is also basically the need to consistently assess and avoid hazard. I kind of insist on that because I think that I studied chemistry 30 years ago, and now I discovered that, basically chemistry has moved into a totally different place. And so the truth in chemistry is going to continue to be true at time t, but we perfectly know that, T+1, when new technology would come, there will be a consistent need to reassess. Green chemistry does address the basically interest of each economy in risk analysis, and so this need for information toward risk assessment, and then the build-up of risk management, which is going to be, ideally it would be harmonized worldwide, but we are going to find contexts which are going to make things different. And so can we have the science of the risk assessment so that risk management are basically going to perform as best as possible, and then, of course, the risk communication part. And then also now, I think 21st century chemistry moving toward alternative risk assessment requirements, which are different from what we were used to. Adequacy of JC in strengthening competitiveness, it has to do with basically innovation. When you bring a product on the market which has intelligence, you basically start to compete at a different level, on a different plateau. It's not about volume and price. It's about a very unique technology. It's extremely important. It's extremely important because the U.S. is losing, actually, its leadership on advanced technology. I was reading a paper from NIST, and whereas in the 1990s, we had a surplus on advanced technology. In the basically 2010, we have a deficit. I believe the surplus was $40 billion in 1988, 90. In 2010, according to NIST data based on census statistics, the deficit would be close to $80 billion. And so there is definitely a need to continuously support advanced technology, bring visibility and transparency, attract finance, ascertain compliance because it's much closer to basically chemicals management schemes and much more likely to fulfill those. And address also economic mandates in numerous government agencies, DOE, USDA, U.S. Export-Import Bank, etc. So at the Department of Commerce and the International Trade Administration, which is where my office belongs, basically in 2010 we were tasked to engage in a national export initiative. So the basically idea was to double export within 4 years. So we are now stepping into step 2 of the National Export Initiative, which is the next Global Opportunity Initiative, which is basically supporting industry in finding the next global customer. And I have basically highlighted the priorities of this initiative, which are totally fitting with basically supporting green chemistry overseas. There is also the part of Advanced Manufacturing Initiative, which is in connection with NIST, so an entity which is part of commerce but which is outside of ITA, and also supporting the Department of Commerce EPA Environmental Technology Initiative, which was signed 3 years ago. So the current effort of basically ITA and especially my office in expanding collaborative efforts to support green chemistry, it started with NIST. In 2013, NIST hosted a meeting of federal agencies involved in green chemistry. Businesses were also invited, and it was just a one-day program to share with one another what we were doing in the field of chemistry and green chemistry. So we have basically built up on that to associate NIST, the Advanced Manufacturing Program, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, in our commercial dialogue, and I will develop on that a little later. There's also basically connection with Economic Development Agency. Economic Development Agency is based on economic development within the US of A and especially in difficult areas. So if your company is based in one of those areas, you may have actually an interest in going onto the EDA website and look at what are the possibilities that EDA can offer to not just your company, but eventually to the region. And it's, sustainable development in the field also of manufacturing clusters, etc. Attempting to strengthen the collaboration with other agencies works very well with EPA, definitely works very well with Department of Energy, Department of Defense, NASA, USTR, as well as Department of State, which has the launch program this year, and definitely seeking input from ITA, but also from NIST, and I think there was a very strong collaboration between the two. Also, domestic partnership, public-private partnership, again, cited Department of State and the launch initiative, but also getting much more connected to initiatives based on industry organizations such as the Green Chemistry Institute and the roundtables and the memberships of the roundtables, JC3, the Green Building Council, etc. And again, our goal is to, on the continuum from invention toward market access to be more aware of what is happening and more responsive of basically the need of companies to support adoption of green chemistry, not just at the domestic level, but also overseas. And this is where the beauty of International Trade Administration is that we engage in commercial dialogue as a result of free trade agreements, as a result of bilateral relationships. And so based on those trade relations that are very unique to ITA, we started a dialogue on green chemistry with the ASEAN. So the ASEAN are, to make it simple, small countries in Asia Pacific, such as Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Indonesia, etc. And so we started a dialogue with them in 2012, and in 2015, we are basically proposing workshops in different industry sectors, and right now they are, the ASEAN have been focused on the pharmaceutical sector, automotive sector, cosmetic sector. And so we made a proposal, we are waiting for their response, and I will be seeking basically participation of companies. So if your company is involved in those markets and in those sectors, I would very much appreciate to get your contact information. We also engage in the dialogue on green chemistry with the European Union, knowing that basically as they move forward in the implementation of REACH, there will be a need to find substitutes, and this is where basically the private sector and the activities of the private sector in the field of green chemistry are going to be resourceful for both countries. I will speak a little later of the Market Development Cooperation Program, because I really think that this is a program that you should know of and potentially consider applying for to help you basically export overseas. I spoke of trade advocacy, and so if you or a member of your company want to basically take membership in our trade advisory committees, which are providing advice basically to the government on negotiation and inclusion of innovation in those negotiations, that would be totally relevant. And other negotiating opportunities. For example, the U.S. government is engaged in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, and so do you have an interest in that, and how could basically green chemistry be part of the implementation of this agreement or the pathway moving forward? And the same thing vis-a-vis the trade investment partnership with the EU. What do you think of basically inclusion of emerging technologies or advanced manufacturing in the making of the trade agreement? I will also add that vis-a-vis commercial dialogues, France has been expressing an interest in green chemistry, very strong grounding in bio-based products, but definitely an interest in green chemistry, the umbrella green chemistry as well. There could be an opportunity with India, which is also a large chemical manufacturing hub, and India engaging in basically creating a chemicals management scheme. And so should we basically engage with India on a dialogue on green chemistry so that there is an inclusion from the get-go. Opportunities and challenging. It's basically a serious technological innovation, and with on the positive aspects that are associated with that. Challenges are related to the fact that green chemistry basically needs a lot of cooperation between different people in different sectors throughout the supply chain. Whereas it's a new sector, basically it lacks clarity on standards. So that is part of the making. But this is exactly why I think it's really important to become more visible, more transparent about green chemistry now, so that we avoid the mistakes which were made with biotechnology, nanotechnology, when countries were doing things in their own, locally, and then products started to move overseas, and that's when the clash of basically evaluation system started. So I guess my intention is really to have a dialogue basically installed from the very beginning, so that trust and information are built over time, and we basically get to much more harmony than the other experiences. So what I would like you to consider is a program, so again, which is hosted at the Department of Commerce in the International Trade Administration. So in my section of the Department of Commerce, this program is called Market Development Cooperator Program, MDCP, created in 1988, founded in 1992. And basically, it's an opportunity to support exports overseas. So each year, the ITA will select 7 or 9 projects, and of course, it depends on basically the value associated to those projects. Maximum value, maximum award is $300,000, and the project activities are basically targeted at promotion of exports. So examples will include participation of a sector to foreign trade shows, so that there is, basically visibility which is brought to that sector and its unique products or processes, opening a demo center, or seeking coordination with, basically either one country overseas or a region seeking coordination on standards, for example. And so the application process, you have to be a non-profit to apply. The award will be up to $300,000. Will have to be done in partnership with federal agencies, so definitely Department of Commerce is key. But USAID could be also key if we are basically seeking exports in less developed countries. Department of State could be involved, Department of Energy could be involved if it were related to energy efficiency, or water use or something like that. ITA will review the application based on specific evaluation criteria, and here I basically mention the most important, which is the potential for exports, the potential for increase in exports, potential for basically sustaining or creating U.S. jobs as a result of this program. Performance measurements, it's important. Partnership with ITA, but also U.S. government. And basically the creativity side, so what is unique about this approach. So I guess I want to insist on that, meaning that yes, it's a government program, and the framework for application is very strict, but still I think that you should feel free to be creative in your approach, in your application. It's a commitment for 2 or 3 years, and basically whatever the cooperator, so whatever the applicant will seek in terms of award, it's with the understanding that the cooperator will bring 2/3 of the total cost. So if you were to apply for the big award of $300,000, then you have to be ready to show that you yourself, as the applicant, as the cooperator, have or are bringing $600,000. Now, it doesn't have to be in dollars per se. It can be in expertise, can be in hours of work or something like that. But basically, those two have to balance. I guess I'm trying to move on to the next slide.
There you go, Blandine. You're all set.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
And
I did it for you.
Yeah, thank you. So how does it work? Again, to apply, you have to be a nonprofit. So it can be a trade association, can be a chamber of commerce, can be state trade departments or other nonprofits. Oops. I have lost my slide, so I do not know how. Oh,
there you go. You're all set.
Okay. And so the criteria for evaluation are based on basically, I am listing here 10 of them so that you get a clear idea of what the application project will be basically evaluated upon. And those criteria are ITA priorities, and so basically there will be a need to contrast and compare the objective of the project vis-a-vis those priorities. And you have basically contact information for Brad S., who is the director of the MDCP program. If you have further questions and needs, you can also call me, and I will address your questions as much as possible. So I think with that, I shall conclude. Definitely appreciating your time, your attention. Glad to have the opportunity to let you know that, yes, Department of Commerce is aware of the work of basically innovators in green chemistry, and we are basically wanting to help you, and so you should basically feel free to use us and to provide basically a recommendation on pathway forward, pathway forwards for this year, but also moving into 2015. And again, based on your company, your sector, and where you see opportunity basically tapping into the market, obviously. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Blandine. We have a little time for question and answer.
Okay.
I have one question that was in the question and answer box. If you do have a question for Blandine, please write your question in the question and answer box at the top of your screen. So the first question, Blandine, is what are the different sectors that you are completing workshops with in Indonesia? One participant had heard of cosmetics but wasn't sure of the other ones that for.
Yeah, so basically we made a proposal to the ASEAN and based on their expression of interest in 3 sectors, which were cosmetics, automotive, as well as pharmaceuticals. So basically green chemistry and the impact of green chemistry in those sectors. So the format for engaging with the ASEAN at this very moment would be to basically have a government-to-government, but also business-to-government presentation. So it would be a presentation of green chemistry so that government officials from the ASEAN do become aware of the work of basically the U.S. in the field of green chemistry, but then having companies, so having private sector with experience in the field and ideally in the region on green chemistry, sharing this experience with government officials. So that would be the first workshop, and then, so the introduction basically, and then what we would like to do is then, you know, basically go further in either, how would I say, increasing government-to-government dialogue on green chemistry, but also business-to-business dialogue, and see what are the possibilities, and creating those basically connection between governments and businesses so that when there is a need to address an issue or when there is a recommendation, then you know, there is a more fluid basically capacity to exchange.
Great. And how can networks like the GC3 or the Green Chemistry Institute help you with those connections? How do companies then connect with the Department of Commerce? Do they just write you and say, we're interested in participating, or how do those connections get made with the companies, many of which are small, medium-sized companies that may not be known to the Department of Commerce at this point?
Yeah, so I think, you know, basically for us and myself, especially to get to know multiple interests in green chemistry from not just, you know, basically Washington, D.C. and within the Beltway is extremely important. I think that for entities such as JC3 or, you know, other groups basically which are working in the field of green chemistry, it's if they have or if they start to see the design of an interest in a specific region of the world, and if they feel that, well, you know, they could gain from being supported in moving their products into those regions, I think it would be basically wonderful for us to know, and again, because we can use certain of the commercial dialogue to help introduce the notion that, you know, yes, the U.S. is working on green chemistry. It's an important, basically, activity, and we basically we have an interest in working with the markets overseas. And if you have importers in markets overseas which are seeking your product, I think it's also important for us to know that.
Now, as you're working with other governments, like in the European Union or Asian governments, is there a role for networks like the GC3 or the GCI to participate in those dialogues?
Absolutely, because I think that, you know, again, when we engage in a government-to-government dialogue, for example, with the EU, we are doing government-to-government dialogues, and so it's already right there. It's a wonderful opportunity to start to share basically activities that we do, and of which, you know, we were not aware of. So it's a way to figure out, oh, actually we are working in the same direction. And so there is this basically build-up of, how would I say, if not collaborative work, at least, you know, understanding that we are working in the same direction. And then it's also for government officials to start to become aware of the business connections which are behind this. And so, and basically it's supporting each other, meaning that businesses being able to meet government officials with an understanding of who they are, what they do, and what they need, and also government officials being able to interact with industry, their knowledge, and their progression over time. And so it is extremely important for us to know of you and to basically have you ask us, you know, how to help, because you have an idea of what the limits, what the constraints are. So we cannot resolve all of it, but at least we can, you know, figure out a way to start to engage a much stronger, basically, dialogue.
Right. I mean, let me raise one issue, and this isn't as much the International Trade Agency as well as much as thinking about incentives. At our last Green Chemistry and Commerce Council annual roundtable, Mark Verbruggen, the CEO of NatureWorks, talked a bit about how the Thai government is setting up a bio-industrial park, which would provide lots of opportunities for commingling production and setting up new production. And some of the companies in this green chemistry space are a little worried that other countries are providing much better incentive packages to manufacture in their countries. So your work is focused primarily on exports, but are there other parts of the government that are trying to think about how we make sure that we're actually manufacturing these products in the United States as well?
Exactly, and I think that's when, you know, at the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned the other parts of Department of Commerce with which I am working, which are NIST. NIST has, you know, the responsibility for advanced manufacturing, and they are trying to create basically advanced manufacturing networks, and they have developed policies, developed, you know, basically grant application toward that. And so I think industry should keep an eye on this activity within NIST. The same with Economic Development Agency. They are trying to create manufacturing clusters. And so being aware of that, I think that companies in specific areas of the US of A should, you know, basically let EDA know of their interest in creating those clusters and seeking help. It's possible. And so I think that, yes, definitely your groups should take advantage of that. And
Great.
should be aware, should definitely be aware of that.
Great. Another question, if you know, from your perspective of sort of seeing internationally in dialogues in Asia and Europe, what do you think are the biggest challenges or barriers to mainstreaming green chemistry right now that that governments the agencies like the Department of Commerce can help industry to overcome?
I think that, you know, from a U.S. Basically background, and that was at the origin of my decision to really move forward with green chemistry, is as I mentioned, I mean, the lack of leadership in chemicals management. And so countries basically now, when they seek advanced chemicals management, they are not, unfortunately, turning toward us. And so I really felt, well, there is a need to highlight the fact that even though our chemicals management was born in 1970s, we do have a very vibrant private sector working toward new chemicals design. And so that, to me, that is the first step, is to allow for the U.S. private sector to show up in terms of, you know, new chemicals design. And then vis-a-vis adoption of new chemicals design and vis-a-vis adoption of rules of new chemicals design, it's not, you know, it's a new field. It's a totally different approach. And so I think countries are starting to, you know, basically look into it, taking steps toward it, but it's going to be, you know, a constant readjustment. And so what matters is that countries start to take steps and industry be involved in this conversation. And so if, you know, if we are successful in doing that, I am okay with the fact that it's not going to happen within a year, but I just want, you know, those steps to be taken and those steps to be more and more, how would I say, numerous. So, you know, basically starting with maybe a dialogue in the ASEAN with the EU, but also what about next year, you know, 5 dialogues going on. And then at some point, I mean, these countries are going to meet and say, well, we need to do something about this, and we can, you know, we can agree on certain things. And so that would be a wonderful result of that.
Great. So you mentioned in your early slides the idea of some kind of interagency committee on green chemistry. This was actually written into the draft bill, the Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act, which Senator Coons from Delaware has introduced along with others.
Okay.
Has that process happened of building this interagency committee, or do you see good potential collaboration across agencies? We've had several agencies involved in these calls in the past.
I do feel that there is, you know, there is a willingness, there is, definitely a desire to collaborate. What I have been struggling with last year is who should be the host, who, you know, which entity is the best place to do this. My feeling is that, you know, basically the organization of the meetings and could be industry. So industry would, you know, basically make recommendation or call the meetings of this interagency group. But where, you know, where's the group hosted? I am right now discussing with NIST to basically figure out how we can actually, you know, make this happen. I do not have a response yet.
Great. I'll give, if there's any more questions, you can write them into the question box. So what, if you could explain just briefly your key priorities, 1 or 2 things that groups like the GC3 could help you support in the coming couple of years.
I think that what I really would like is, you know, to have basically green chemistry move forward with not just 1 market development cooperator program, but, you know, 2. So I would really like for the audience to read this basically program and feel free to apply if they need help in understanding or, filling up the application, I will be very, very glad to support that. And then vis-a-vis the dialogues, your company is most likely exporting overseas or manufacturing overseas. And so what do you know, and where could the Department of Commerce help? I think that when we will receive the response of the ASEAN, I would love to be able to reach out to companies, again, close to the sectors, and if they have a representative overseas who could, basically make a presentation of the company and the reason why the company is invested in green chemistry, that would be wonderful participation. If you basically, as a company, if you have other ideas of what could be the value added of Department of Commerce in making green chemistry more visible overseas, I will definitely take that information in.
Great. From the GC3's part, I think we would be more than happy to work with you on these initiatives and these dialogues. I think it would be a great opportunity for many of the companies in the network. So with that, I want to thank you so much, Blandine, for your presentation, for your dedication to the green chemistry field, and obviously for the Department of Commerce's support of U.S. business in building a green chemistry agenda. With that, I just want to announce a couple of our upcoming events. We have 2 webinars coming up, actually 3 coming up in the next couple of months. We have one next Wednesday of our green chemistry education webinar series on building market share for green chemistry. We have another of the Mainstreaming Green Chemistry series on Tuesday, January 6th on CEO Perspectives on Sustainability, reflecting on the Pricewaterhouse CEO survey. And then, of course, please mark your calendars for the 10th Annual GC3 Innovators Roundtable, which will be April 23rd to 30 at Nike's headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for participating in today's webinar. The slides and the recording for the webinar will be up shortly on the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council's website. And again, Blandine, thank you very much for your participation today, and we wish everyone a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.